Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to our first session of our summer series titled Benchmark, Building an Engineering Metrics Function. I'm Dan Lyons, co-founder and COO of LinearB, also the host of the Dev Interrupted podcast. And I'm joined today by Jenna Smith, Senior Customer Success Manager at LinearB.
Hello,
What's up, Jenna?
everybody. Yes, that's me. What's up? I'm happy to be here.
Awesome to be doing this with you. As I was saying in the beginning, the summer series is a 3-part event. We're going to be talking about benchmarking today, but there's 2 other ones that I'm super stoked about. The next one is called Automate, Pre-Merge Workflow Automation for Dev Efficiency. And then we're going to follow it up with Improve, using engineering intelligence to drive business outcomes. So those are going to be the next 2. And we might reference them a few times during this talk. But everything that you're going to see today is about building an engineering metrics function. And we got a lot of great stuff for you. Before we dive into that, there's a little bit of a context that I want to share. What you're looking at here, it's titled Eng Leaders Formula. And how we talk about this usually at LinearB is we say the word dual mandate, or the dual mandate of a VP of engineering. And what we found with our community, the best engineering leaders and the ones that are doing the best for their organization, they kind of have these 2 worlds that they live in. The first one, it's on the left-hand side. It's called operational excellence. And this is something that most engineering leaders and engineering organizations have been doing since, I guess, the beginning of time, or at least, 30 years ago when I started doing this kind of stuff. And that's all about efficiency of delivery, quality of delivery. What are we going to do to automate our processes? But the cool thing over the last few years, maybe like 5 years or so, the other side of this formula around driving business outcomes, this is the thing that I'm really happy about for our community. This is where engineering leaders are now getting a true seat at the executive table. And this is where they can say things, and we're going to talk about resource allocation, but how is what we're doing actually impacting the business positively? Because a lot of the companies out there are really product and engineering driven companies. And what we find is when engineering leaders combine both of these skill sets, that's when amazing things happen. And a little more on the context side, we're going to touch on each one of these a bit. But there's essentially 4 categories of engineering metrics out there. The ones on the right-hand side are more towards that business outcome type thing. So that's resource allocation, project predictability. On the left-hand side, a little bit more towards operational excellence. You're going to think about efficiency metrics and quality metrics. And probably a lot of people have heard about the DORA metrics. Those are some of those higher level efficiency and quality metrics that kind of live in between here. And we'll touch on each one of those. So that's a little bit of context for you. Now we're going to get started with the true agenda of this talk, building an engineering metrics function. And I'm going to kick it over to Jenna to get us rolling.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, thanks for the intro and priming us up for that. As you know, being on the customer success team here, I've helped create and roll out hundreds of metrics programs to customers all around the globe here at LinearB. And so today, really excited to just be sharing like that step-by-step recipe that really just helps keep things on track and keeps our customers most successful. So basically here it is. You can see it's, 5 curated steps that we kind of go through. I'll go through them just really quickly. Step 1, benchmarking your metrics. Step 2, really getting in there, diving in and diagnosing problems in your organization. Step 3, being able to really set goals and start to thinking about, those problems and how you want to approach them. And then step 4, applying automation. I know that you're really working on this side of the house with our product team, so excited to talk about this in particular with you. And then last is obviously tracking improvement, seeing what that looks like over time.
Yeah, these are awesome. And probably step 1 and 4 are my favorites. So I'm excited to get to both of those. But yeah, let's keep it moving here.
Yeah. So I'm sure a lot of folks, obviously, today that are listening, like you had just mentioned a minute ago about like those efficiency and quality metrics. A lot of people are like, but wait, like I read Accelerate and what about Dora, right? They're probably wondering, like, how do those come into play? Like, obviously, still want to call them out. I mean, I'm sure you would agree they're super important still. They're
Yep.
great high level indicators of that efficiency and quality, obviously. But while they're obviously still super important, and I think, would both agree that they're North Star metrics, right?
Yeah.
I think that they're definitely more of a lagging indicator. And obviously, there's a lot more things that lead into that. But yeah, I mean, maybe I think that would be interesting is maybe for you to talk a little bit about maybe like why LinearB really leaned in to Dora metrics, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's something that we took up now, I guess, many years ago, and you'll kind of see it front and center in our product and everything we do. I think what's cool about them is a lot of engineering leaders, organizations, executive teams are trying to get to a metric or a few metrics that kind of describe the end-to-end health of something. You called it North Star, which totally makes sense. And I think what's great about these is if you combine the efficiency one, cycle time and deployment frequency, with quality, CFR and MTTR, these are your top leading health indicators, I think, of an engineering organization.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it makes sense. And obviously, it really resonates with the community as well, when that book Accelerate came out. And so I think it really, shows at a higher level why engineering organizations want to be tracking stuff like this. Obviously, there's other departments that make a business function as well. And a lot of those departments have their own North Star metrics, like in customer success, we have churn, et cetera. So it makes sense that, now that things are developing throughout time, that naturally an engineering organization and team would probably need some sort of data to really back it up. So it
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, something that you tell me and what I hear often from the community, organizations that use, I think, any OKRs, but specifically engineering organizations that are selecting maybe one or two Dora metrics, or maybe one of the metrics that we'll look at later, usually gets the outcome that they're looking for faster, or can get everyone on board. So that's the other thing that I would say about the Dora metrics. It's really easy to set an OKR with them. And I think you would agree with that, Jenna.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've got your objective, right? And then I think that those specific metrics really align nicely into like a key result, for example, and getting that quantitative measure in there for success.
All right. So, these are kind of the top North Star metrics that I think, most people have seen before or heard before. But as you said, they're lagging indicators. This is the outcome of a bunch of other stuff that you need to track against or benchmark against. And that leads us to this slide, which I think you have a few things that you want to say about.
Yeah, I mean, step 1, benchmarking, right? That's the first step into this whole process of improving. And that's the whole main topic of obviously why we're here today. But when we look at these metrics, obviously you can see there's a lot that goes into efficiency and quality. For example, you've got at the top again those Dora metrics like cycle time on the efficiency side, and then you've got change failure rate on the quality side. But then underneath, you can really start to see some of those leading indicators and how things are going, right, from a best practices standpoint. So for example, a lot of my customers, when they come to me, they're like, I'd really love to improve cycle time, right? But you can't just like really go to your engineering team and be like, move faster,
Yeah.
write code faster. Like it
Just make
doesn't
it better.
really work.
Just cut it in
Just
half.
do it. Yeah. Just move faster. Just move your hands faster, But we know it doesn't really work like that. So these leading indicators at the bottom, I typically, when I'm on calls with my customers, the first thing that I always look at is, for example, PR size. What is your average batch size? That's like, I would say, probably the biggest indicator in cycle time. That's just from my personal, what I've seen in my day to day. But I'm just curious to see, like, obviously you've run engineering teams before. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I was going to give you my two favorite ones. So I was going to give you one on the left-hand side that I love and one on the right-hand side. So efficiency and quality. You pick the one that I like on the quality side, PR size. Because if you told me, hey, Dan, I'm going to show you one data point about 3 organizations, and one has a PR size of 200 or less, one has a PR size of 500, and one has a PR size of 800, I can fairly accurately guess what the experience would be for the developers there, what the cycle time would be. I think it's like one of those great leading indicators when you're working on small, digestible, easy to review chunks of work. Things feel better, things move better, and your deploy frequency is going to increase and your cycle time is going to decrease. So I love that one, PR size for sure. And the one that I like on the left-hand side, I've actually changed my viewpoint over the last few years. I'm really into merge frequency. I think this is a metric that every engineering leader or any group manager needs to be measuring. Deployment frequency is the DORA metric. So that's the one that we showed on the left-hand side. But what I really like about merge frequency, it's an indicator of developer experience. So you can use that metric to say, okay, how often are my developers able to merge code? How often are they getting that dopamine hit of like, I finished work, this feels good, I got it merged? And the other thing that I like about merge frequency, for those of you that are maybe working at an enterprise, like a larger company, maybe you have a deployment situation where there's many stages. Maybe you have a deployment situation where it's owned by another group. It's like owned, not by you. I think merge frequency is really at the core of getting high quality code merged rapidly. So those are the two that I love here.
I mean, that makes sense. I mean, at the end of the day, we know developers want to do two things. They want to code and get their code merged. So that makes sense. Didn't even really think about that one. I would say on the PR side, I definitely agree with you. Again, not a developer, but reviewing absolutely massive PRs doesn't sound enjoyable. I mean, we're also human. A lot of things can probably slip through the cracks easily on the quality side. So makes sense.
Yeah, not enjoyable, not fun at all. Can ruin a whole day. Okay, so this is really cool, and I'll let you speak to this, and kind of a shout out to our data analyst team that we're kind of, I would say, proud to have this opportunity to analyze so many PRs. Jenna, what would you say about this information?
Yeah, I mean, our internal team, the fact that they were able to pull something like this together is awesome. And it really helps, I would say, the community with just overall understanding where they lie, right? Like you said, we're ingesting millions of PRs all the time. And so by analyzing those and actually coming up with benchmarking categories, it really starts the process of helping diagnose problems. Obviously, you can see the various categories like elite, strong, fair, and needs focus. And I think that they're super helpful. But also, one thing that I get a lot personally in my day to day with my customers is like when they're just starting off, I usually get a lot of questions around like, what happens if you're really strong? Or like, what if you're really in the red? And I think that if you have any experience, about how you've approached this, maybe with like executive leadership or board, like what do what now? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, this is what I was saying in the different steps. So, that I like. This is always one of the, I think, most exciting steps. Step one is to understand where and how you compare to industry standard. And that's what this slide is really showing you with the elite, strong, fair, and needs focus. Now, the truth of the matter is you're probably going to have a mixed bag. Like, I haven't seen anyone that is all elite or like all needs focus, right? There's probably usually, you might be great in some areas. You might have a bottleneck in a certain area. If you have a bottleneck in a certain area, you can focus on, solving that. But I think what can be cool for us to talk about is, what do you do when you get your benchmark report and the information for you, like the results look good? And what do you do when you get this report and it maybe hits you as like, okay, maybe this is not so good? So I'll start off. I've been working with a bunch of customers that see this report and say, hey, we're actually in really great shape. And first and foremost, when you're in that situation, actually both situations really, like, transparency matters. It's great to show your engineering organization. It's great to highlight this to your executive peers if you're sitting at the executive table. A lot of people within our community will bring this information to the board. But usually the advice that I give for someone or an organization that, at first is in really great shape is to talk about what it takes to maintain being strong or being elite over a series of quarters or years. And what I mean by that, especially in the economic times now, you're going to have new teams coming into your organization. You're going to have teams or people leaving your organization. You might be in a scale-up mode where you're like doubling your team size, or the expectation on you is doubling in terms of value delivery. You also might be in a 2023 situation where you're downsizing. So more so than where you start out, it's more so important than that is, what are you going to do to maintain that elite or strong status over time? And I think that might lead, of course, we're going to talk about automation and all these things you can do. But I think that might lead, well, Jenna, you were telling me maybe about a customer that wasn't in, perfect shape, but it's kind of more from where you start to where you go than anything else. And the context matters a lot here too.
Yeah, definitely. Happy to dive into that a little bit. I was working with a customer recently where, when getting uploaded and onboarded, I should say, into LinearB, they recognized very quickly that they had a planning accuracy problem. What's interesting is, like, LinearB obviously is a mirror, right? And it showed there's a planning accuracy problem. But obviously, when talking to the leaders within this organization, they all also were saying, we know we have a planning problem. So it was verifying and validating the problem with data, right? Now, in terms of when they brought this data to the CTO who brought LinearB in at this company, he basically said, what I'd really love to see is, right now, our planning accuracy is only like 25%. This is impacting our ability to ship features on time. We have so much carryover work, right? And it's hard to focus when you have that. And so he basically was saying, I'd love for us to hit 60%. If we can hit 60%, then we can allocate 40% of the rest of the time to whatever else we need to within that sprint. And I'm okay with that 60. And the customer was basically saying to me, well, hey, if 60 is our 100, can I configure it to do so? Which isn't really necessary. What you should be thinking about as a team is, again, all of these benchmarks are for basically, again, for you to get a baseline and understand, what do we see from other organizations, other industries, other sizes, et cetera. And really what you should be doing is, again, using that information. But as a team, if 60% is your 100, shoot for that. That would be a huge improvement to, say, going from 25% planning accuracy to 60. That would make a huge difference in the organization. And I would say probably really start to like feel that alleviation in that friction and those problems for them.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. Like when we're talking about planning accuracy, it's essentially the metric that's saying how much did you do of what you said you were going to do. And again, for all of these metrics, context matters so much. If you're in a situation where it's a new product or project, there's a lot of innovation going on. Yeah, your planning accuracy will probably be a little bit lower than what you're seeing here, and that's okay. If you're in a situation where you have a product that's maybe been in market 8 years, 10 years, you're not investing, taking risks and investing too much into it, it might be a little bit higher. So yeah, I love the advice that you're giving. Like for sure, everyone, you should know where you are against the benchmarks. It's kind of that, I don't know, smoke trail of where you should look into and where you should dive into, but also the context is super, super important.
Yeah, definitely. There's always nuance, right? It's data, it tells a story. But again, like you said, it's that signal to smoke sooner.
All right, cool. I think we hit on what we wanted. Anything else that we want to say there, or good to move on?
Nah, I'd move on.
Okay, so we'll kick it to you on diagnosing the problem.
Yeah, so step 2 is really where you can start to talk about diagnosing the problem. And it's where you can start to really drill down and figure out, like process wise across the board, where problems are. So you can see when you log into LinearB automatically right off the bat where things are going well and not so well. And again, kind of going back to what we just said a second ago, it's like signal to smoke. So you can see here in this specific example, if this was a real LinearB instance for a customer, it's going to notify you and say, hey, cycle time is a little bit higher than we typically see. Things that you might want to start to look into is PR size and pickup time on the quality side of things. Again, your rework rate, your PR size, and PRs merged without review. These are all areas that it's time to take a microscope and start figuring out, where is the friction happening? Where is the bottleneck? What's actually happening here, right?
Yeah. What I love about this, I mean, when you're running an engineering organization, there are so many things. There's so much on your plate. There's so many things going on, and when you look at a metric like cycle time, so we have that in the upper left hand side here. Yeah, okay, we're saying maybe it's not where it needs to be. Maybe it's 4 days, 5 days, maybe it's a week. And the thing is, probably all your developers are feeling like everyone knows that you can feel it. You can feel, it takes like a little bit too long to get that code out to production. And when you bring that visibility to the organization, there's almost what I've seen as a relief. Like, thank you so much for quantifying this. You're quantifying what we're feeling. Now we can do something about it. But what I also like here, like when you're saying, okay, the PR size is a little bit too high, that's the type of leading indicator that's really hard to feel. So it's like, okay, I was feeling that the cycle time was a little high, brought relief to the organization. I've diagnosed the problem. We're tracking it now. We have an OKR on it. But I didn't realize that of all the things that could be the problem, actually, like the size of the work that we're doing is much too high. Now we can set, I don't want to like jump ahead too fast, but we can set goals and automations and things to improve that leading indicator.
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious to know, like, this is just me asking a question. Do you find that in an organization where maybe like the maturity of like a developer, like you're talking about like a staff software engineer versus like where you have maybe like more associate software engineers, do you feel like that plays a part in these numbers too? Like, just curious.
Yeah, that's actually an amazing question. I think it's like usually what I thought of when I was an engineering leader is like, what's the shape of my organization? What's the balance that I have to more juniors versus like what you were calling like a staff engineer and like a really senior engineer. Typically, I don't want to like label it like 100% of the time or something like that, but typically your more junior engineers are going to have some of those larger PRs. It's an art to kind of break down work, right? So, at least I'll just speak for myself. When I was more junior, I would try to do everything at once, kind of take on the entire problem, didn't know how to kind of piece it out into smaller chunks of work that would lead to smaller PRs. That was a skill that could be diagnosed and, kind of looked at over time. And especially, I think we'll get to some of like our worker bee alert and getting those alerts to say, okay, actually, I could break this up. Because I think it's also kind of like the awareness, especially when you're earlier in your career, that your work affects the next person.
Yeah.
So I never really thought when I was like a junior saying, okay, like I got this work from my standpoint, it's done, but my PR size is 800 lines of code. Now I'm going to typically pull a senior off of what they're doing, and they got to kind of waste a day on this or even send it back to me. So those are some of the behaviors that I've seen. Yeah.
You know what's interesting too is I actually had a customer recently come to me about this, and they were talking about, how do I get my developers to write smaller PRs? That's the product guy's problem, like kind of like the product and engineering counterparts and them having that relationship to work together. And that also could be, a conversation that this can help improve too. Like, I basically was saying, well, if those tickets and stories are larger, and then you're obviously having larger PRs because of that, again, LinearB can help generate that conversation too. That's an interesting data point as well.
Yeah, really good point. And also especially when we're thinking about like predictability and project delivery. I mean, that's kind of like the ultimate combination of, is product able to think of a way that we can make this lean and break up stories, and is engineering able to execute it in the same way?
Yeah.
Really good point there.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Let's keep it flowing. So we got step 3, setting goals.
Yeah, this is a super critical part, obviously. After diagnosing the problem, that's where you have to start, obviously, really putting a motion into place to actually improve the problem. In general, when I'm talking to my customers, I recommend starting out smaller, meaning, only setting, say, 1 to 2 goals per quarter. Typically, I like to see, you have your org level OKRs, and then you can have, say, a couple of team goals that nicely coincide and complement those org level OKRs. And then also bringing, as you can see, there are some examples here on the left and the right that also bring in actual some of the metrics from LinearB that we were just talking about. So you can, again, utilize, when logging into LinearB, utilize that initial benchmarking information, showing where you needed improvement, and then set an actual objective in motion with metrics to support that.
Yeah, this is super cool. And this is where I see like sometimes that relief set in on, okay, I'm like so happy we have, most organizations have OKRs, but great, we picked the right OKR. I want to decrease cycle time, or I want to make sure there's less bugs found in production. I think when you have like an organization that is moving in the same direction, especially if that's the thing that developers are feeling, and you as an engineering leader are saying, we're measuring this now, I have a conscious effort to improve your experience. That's what it translates to. That's when I've seen organizations improve quarter after quarter, but it starts with this goal setting.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, just keeping it to simple, I would say, is best as well. If you go in, and in the case of an organization where, as we had talked about before, you're seeing a lot of red, focus on the things that you feel are low-hanging fruit, and that will make a big impact for your organization.
Yeah, that's really, really true. Actually, I think we talked about the other day, but sometimes there's a tendency to want to pick multiple, we call them playbooks. Like there's a playbook to improve your efficiency at LinearB, a playbook to improve quality and predictability, to want to pick like 3 of them. But really, I mean, this is the advice you give, right? Like, let's pick 1, maybe 2 at the most, but I would probably recommend 1.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's a lot of moving parts, getting it all set up, focusing in on an area. And then you also want to be able to go back and say, hey, okay, we started our playbook with our customer success manager at LinearB around, say, Q1, right? Start of Q1. you want to be able to look back and see all the work that we did to improve actually did something. So that's where it's also important to kind of focus in on an area to see, is all the work that we're putting into it actually working?
And I think that's a good lead in to now after I've set my goals. So I pick 1 to 2 goals, maybe one of them. This is where I think like the magic and the fun happens. But I'll let you kick us off here, Jenna.
Yeah, I mean, automation is a huge part in this. So when, for example, for you newcomers, when you log into LinearB, you can actually set goals up in LinearB in the app itself. And setting those goals up is actually sort of one of the first parts of starting the automation side for you. And getting that in play is actually where you'll really start to see the needle moving, because we'll be proactively notifying you about problem areas that you've set. And from my feedback that I've heard from my customers, I feel like engineering teams specifically really love this part of LinearB, because maybe they typically wouldn't have known about, say, specific units of work. And so now with this automation, it's helping you know about those units of work that might be going sideways a little bit sooner. And it again goes back to that like signal to smoke. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I've noticed too more and more recently is in engineering stand-ups, for example, if you go into a stand-up, we have like a customer success stand-up. And my manager will ask me, like, hey, how's everything going? And I'll just be like, yeah, good, thumbs up, right? Because maybe I'm not thinking about what I worked on yesterday or today so far yet. And so maybe there isn't like anything that's really top of mind or burning at the moment, because most of the times when you ask a human what's going on, you're going to be like, everything's good. But at the end of the day, that's where, this can really help with things like that. It's like actively notifying you about specific units of work that are on fire potentially. And the other side of it is that on the left-hand side, what I personally really love about LinearB is the SLA style goal. So you can see 85% of these units of work met the goal that we put in place. So I always recommend to my customers, maybe hitting 100% of your goals isn't necessary, right? But maybe shooting for 80 to 90% is, because we know outliers are going to happen. And so putting that in place and seeing that trend is also a huge part of it too. So that was what I kind of wanted to hit on. I know that like you're in particular really involved on like the programmable automation side. You're heavily involved internally. And so I think that you should talk a little bit about what that means.
Yeah. So first and foremost, the way that I think about it is when you go and set an OKR or a goal or reduce pickup time, it's like what we were saying in the beginning, where it's like, hey, just go and cut cycle time in half. And everyone will be like, okay, okay, maybe we can look at some insights and we can do a little bit. But what do you mean like in half? When you go and set a goal, I think it's always also great to come with, as an engineering leader, and by the way, here's what I'm going to do for you to help hit that goal. And what we found at LinearB is automation is the best way to cut some of these benchmarks in half. And so we came out with 2 tools. One of them is called GitStream. One of them is called WorkerB. This is actually going to be the second series that we do, or the second session in the series that we do. So we're going to do a whole thing on it. So I'll try to go light here. On the GitStream side, what you'll see in the upper right-hand side, it's all programmable, which is really, really cool. You can customize it to your desire. And what it's doing is actually, through your code, a PR analysis. Because we found, especially with like PR pickup time and cycle time, the area that usually a lot of development organizations need the most help with is in that PR area. That's where we can get our most bang for our buck. So with GitStream, you can start saying a few things, like, for example, hey, this PR size is enormous. Send an automated change request back to the developer to break it up, for example. You can also say, hey, this PR, it's actually super low risk. It's testing only, it's documentation only. All of the tests pass. So let's, get and it's a senior developer. Let's let them do a self-review and approve. Let's not waste anyone else's time. We're not going to get any value there. On the flip side, we got to think about quality. We definitely don't want bugs found in prod. So you can start, and from a security perspective too. So you can start saying things like, hey, this is high risk code. It's really, really large. There's a lot of lines of change here. There's a lot of rework going on. Let's make sure there's 2 approvers. Or for example, let's say we have Sonar running and it found a vulnerability. Okay, we want to make sure that in this PR review, even after that vulnerability is fixed or changed, that we have a security reviewer. So it really allows you to customize, cut your cycle time in half, but also think about quality. And the other thing that we have is called LinearB. It's a chatbot that Jenna was speaking about on the lower right-hand side here. I kind of think of this as out-of-the-box automation. If Gitstream is programmable workflows, it's customizable, everything is codable. LinearB is more out-of-the-box. You turn it on, it just starts working. So it's going to, for example, tell each developer how long the review is going to take. So they can say, okay, maybe I don't want to do this like 5 minutes before lunch and then break my review flow and have to start over. And like another example of what it does is in the screenshot here. Okay, there's only like 5 changes to this code. Why don't I send that to you in Slack or whatever like chat service you're using, and you can actually see the change here, and can I get like a quick approve? So these are the things that you can do as an engineering leader to say, yeah, we set this goal. Maybe it's an aggressive goal, but here's how we're going to automate and help.
Yeah, great points. Don't want to spoil our second series too much.
I know I probably already went too long on it, so don't want to spoil that. Definitely come and check out the next session where we're going to go like deep dive into this automation.
Yeah, and if you're just listening in, you're a LinearB customer and you haven't enabled LinearB or Gitstream, talk to your customer success manager. We're always happy to talk more about it with y'all.
Awesome. All right. Step 5, tracking improvement. What do you got for us, Jenna?
Yeah, this is the last step in our homemade recipe for improvement, right? And as you can see from this graph, really what I think it's trying to visualize is that it's very easy in LinearB to look at these reports. We have out-of-the-box reports. You can also create custom dashboards if you want to. And really what it's trying to drive home here is after we've done all this work, at the end of the day, we want to see that decrease in cycle time, that decrease in pickup time, review time, whatever it is that your organization has put into play. Really what you can do is see that in action over time in LinearB.
Excellent. All right. So we talked about operational excellence. That's one part of the dual mandate. The other part of the dual mandate is around driving business outcomes. I really like this side. This is how I think you really get a seat at the executive table. You interact with your CEO, your VP of product, your like CFO. And so I'm super.
And this is really, I feel like this is really new too.
This is
you know what I mean?
Yeah, this is
like
new.
Engineering metrics and flow metrics and DORA metrics have been around for a while now, and this is hot off the press.
Yeah, I think this is like a great point. Evolving space, let's say. And there's a lot of hot new ideas here. There is some benchmarking and standardizations, and I'll make sure that we get to that. But I'll dive right in. So what I'm going to be showing to you today is within LinearB, what we can do and what you should be doing, like regardless of if you're utilizing LinearB or not. This is the type of conversation that you need to be having at the executive table with your peers. Where am I investing my effort? So your CEO, you probably, has kind of like, I don't want to say given you, but you have a decent amount of engineers, a large amount of engineers. That's maybe millions of dollars of effort. Where is that effort actually going into? Got to have a discussion about that. And then, of course, the next thing that they're going to ask is, okay, are we on track? Can we speed up? What's going on? So we call that resource allocation and predictability. I'm going to jump out of this deck Okay, so this is the LinearB app, and actually this is the dashboard, and a lot of what you're seeing here is actually what Jenna was talking about around the DORA metrics and setting goals and all of that. I'm going to jump over into the projects area here. And what you're seeing, I want to orient you to the screen. This is the resource allocation view. So at the top, you see, okay, Jira projects or whatever like PM provider you're working with. So it's going to pull that information. It also correlates it with your Git related information. And there's a few numbers here that are important and also a time frame. So the amount of FTEs or full-time equivalent, the way that you can think about this is, for example, if someone is working on a project, they're probably not working on it all the time, like every single day, every single hour. So it's basically an equation to say, what's the full-time equivalent of effort that we have going in, globally within our organization? And then what's the cost associated to that, which you can actually, put in an input here. You can put in like average cost per employee, that type of stuff, because your CFO and your CEO is going to probably want to talk in dollars. And your CEO and your product person is going to want to talk in investment percentage. So like this is like to orient at the top. Now we have two widgets here and then a table. In the upper left-hand side where it says FTE allocation by issue type, the way that I think about this widget is like, what type of work are we doing? Which is very, very important. Are we working on bugs or are we working on new value? There's more to it than that, but that's kind of like one way to think about it. On the right-hand side, and of course, there's a drop down here that you can select projects, initiatives. You can select a custom field, like whatever you want to do. But this is your investment trend in this example per project over time. How much are we investing into each project? And the table down here is showing all of your project investment with the total work, with the FTE amount, and with the dollar amount going into. Because again, that's the type of conversation that you need to have with your executive team. Now, when I'm speaking with our executive team, I like to use the epics functionality here. So for example, we heard that we were really hot on Gitstream and WorkerBee. So for example, we can have a conversation. I can have a conversation with like Ori, our CEO, and say, hey, I think what I'm hearing from the executive table is that we should have heavy investment in projects A, B, and C. In our case, our development workflow automation, which we showed, I think it was in step 4. Do you agree with that? Because here's the allocation over time. And for example, when I have that conversation, I might not do the last 6 months. I might say, the last quarter. So let's look at Q1. And I can come here and say, does that align with what you are thinking? Because that's where our investment has been going. Or do we need to make a change to that allocation? Now you're having a real business outcome conversation. And of course, you can have that same convo with the CFO. What they're thinking about is dollars. Does this dollar investment level make sense against our business goal? Or do we need to make a change? So that's one thing that I really like about this view, and kind of one of the ways that you can have that project investment or initiative or epic investment conversation with your executive team. Not to mention, usually you should be showing this to your board, and it's kind of by category. I'll get to that. So make sure that you stay, because we have some good board slides. And
Dan, really quick before you move on.
Yeah.
One thing that I wanted to highlight or ask is, let's just say, you don't have this view. How hard do you think it would be to actually quantify this without this information? Is it just based on gut feel at that point?
Okay. So yeah, you can have like a gut feel conversation, but it will go horribly. So that's the truth, because when you get into, CEOs, they're smart. They're going to they say a lot of smarts. It's just like a debate back and forth. It's not so, of course you can try to get this information from Jira. Like I tried to do this before I founded LinearB. Not the easiest thing to do. That's why we created this view. So you can try to you can manually pull the data, put it into this allocation type thing. But at the end of the day, you have to have the accuracy. You have to have something everyone can log into and feel. You kind of have to have that like equality in the conversation. Otherwise, like the strongest voice in the room will just win, if that makes sense, which is not fun.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and great question. Feel free if you want to jump in anytime. When I present this stuff, I think it's super cool, so I just get rolling. The allocation in the upper right hand side, this is a trend. So not only are you going to have the conversation to say, okay, in Q1, this was our investment profile, and do you agree with it? Yes or no? If you get a yes, great. If you get a no, okay, let's change the allocation. What are you thinking? We need to be investing somewhere else, maybe. But you can also see that trend over time. If you go to like a 6-month view and say, for example, for this project, do you agree? Okay, let's like use, I don't know, this one. For this project, do you agree that the investment should be increasing? Because that's what I heard and that's what I thought we agreed on. The other area that's super important when you have this conversation, either with your board or with your executive team, is not only the projects that you're investing into, but what type of work is it? So is that money or is that headcount going to new value? So like functional stories, right? 25%, 24.15%. Or is it going to keeping the lights on? Things like bugs, for example, 21%, probably a little bit high. Like to see that around 14%, or something else. And there's actually some standards around that. After I leave the app and go back, I'll talk about it a little bit. But the type of work that's going on will also be very important to your executive staff. The other thing that will happen in this conversation is when you start showing these projects and saying, okay, yeah, we're investing into Gitstream 27%. We're investing into this allocation report, 6-7%. Usually it'll be like, okay, well, how's it going? How do we make it go faster? Is it on time, or that type of thing? So what I like to do is then go from this resource allocation and you can say, yeah, let me show you what's up with it. And that's when we go to the projects view. So this projects view, it's correlated to the resource allocation. It's showing you, for example, here's our dev workflow project. You saw that in the Epic in the other screen. And let's click into it. My favorite project. And this is going to give you a few pieces of information that can let you know, are you going to be on time? Are things going well, or are things a little too volatile? So there are two metrics that I like to talk about the most are planning accuracy and capacity accuracy. And if I just like analyze this data super quick on the fly, and of course, each project's different. That's what we talked about. Context matters a lot earlier in our conversation. When I'm thinking about capacity accuracy, what that means is, does this project team, this product engineering organization that's working on dev workflows, what's their ability to say, I know how much I can complete within an iteration. I know what my capacity is. In this case, we're at 101%. We are very, very good at understanding what we can complete iteration by iteration, which is amazing. When I'm thinking about planning accuracy, that's more around, of the things that we said that we're going to do, are we actually, what percentage are we getting them done? I think, Jenna, you were talking about this. This is the one you were talking about with a customer, right? The planning accuracy?
Yeah, exactly. And I just want to say that across the board, this is something that's, I would say, in general, across all accounts that I'm working with today, this is a really, really hard thing to get right. There are so many competing priorities for an engineering team. Like, I can only imagine how hard this part is to get right.
Yeah, it's very difficult. Even like 57%, 60% is pretty good. 80% is like unbelievable. But, tying it back to how is the project going, here's a conversation I can now have with the CEO. Look, our capacity accuracy, 101%. We have a great product and engineering team that are working on our dev workflow tools. They know exactly what they can deliver. And that's why that's what I can see in this capacity accuracy. When I'm looking at planning accuracy now, context matters. We're at 57%, but this is a highly innovative product. We are changing what we're working on fairly rapidly. We have a lot of new ideas. It's an unknown space for us. It's not like we've been working on it for 10 years. We're innovating here all the time. So the planning accuracy is maybe a little bit under, but bringing the context, I would expect that. And that's an example of where context matters. Anything else to add to that, Jenna, or should I keep it going?
No, I'd say keep it going.
Two other things that I like to look at in this view, and then we'll wrap it up here. Of course, when you're thinking about the project, like we said, what type of work is going on matters. That's your investment profile, right? Most of the work that we're doing is into tasks and new value, 21% into bugs. Okay, so I think that matters a lot for predictability. And also, you can always dive in and say, okay, like I want to figure out what's going on, like iteration by iteration. So let me look at this like a nitrogen iteration, and you can see the actual delivery breakdown. Here's what we planned and completed. Here's the work that got added in. That's going to cause a little volatility in this planning accuracy, but we did complete it.
Customers love this view.
Yeah. I mean, this is cool. And so this is the next level of inspection here. To figure out, okay, what's going well. They use it for retrospectives a lot, but yeah, what's going well? What can we improve? 17 planned and uncompleted. Okay, that's going to add to some unpredictability and added work in uncompleted. So just letting you know, you can dive in there. Now, if I bring it back here, so you saw that view, you can use it. It's dynamic. I just want to give a few tips on what we're doing on how to like translate some of this information, this R&D data into that business outcome conversation. There are benchmarks that we now have for what your allocation profile should or could be. And usually it's broken down by new capabilities, quality improvements, internal productivity, and keeping the lights on. When we're thinking about new capabilities, that's new features, new value, right? So in this situation, and when you're thinking about like the resource allocation screen that I showed, that's the upper left-hand side pie chart. So 28% of our resources are on new capabilities. 21% are around quality improvements, which usually actually equates to improving existing features. Keeping the lights on, 36%, that's bugs, production issues, things that are coming up just to maintain like great operation. You think of it like SRE kind of. And then internal productivity, this is important, is around what are we doing, for example, to improve our dev workflow? How much are we investing into tools like a Git stream to improve cycle time? When you're looking at this profile, this is where you can talk to your CEO and say, we need to maintain at least 15%, maybe more for internal productivity. And you might say, hey, we're a little bit under. Why is that important? Because I want to deliver new capabilities for you on time and for everyone in the organization. So having these categories kind of lets you have a more business-focused conversation that I really like. And there are standards that you can get, from LinearB in benchmarking your outcomes. So here's, keeping the lights on. And at the bottom here, it's kind of like, think of the size of the organization. So you have keeping the lights on, internal productivity, quality improvement, and new capabilities. You can see where you compare. And again, from the engineering leader standpoint, I think this is a way that you can advocate for investing into your own productivity, your organization's own tooling and dev workflow improvement, keep the quality high. And you can also have that business conversation with your CEO and CFO on, okay, how much are we investing in new capabilities? Are we in a situation where we need new capabilities, or are we kind of just in a situation where we need to make better what we already have? Jenna, any other points there?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, obviously, I'm really excited to see where things go with the resource allocation report. I know we are definitely going to continue to build that out. I think starting to look at these sort of like investment categories are key. For example, if you're pushing towards like a bigger release, obviously you're going to see within a time frame a lot of that new capability work, right? And that would be natural. But then as you're just about to release it, obviously maybe you want to see that shift, for example, into like keeping the lights on or like quality improvement, like working on those bugs. And you'd want to see that shift naturally. So I'm just personally really excited for our customers to see where this goes in the product.
Yeah, this is awesome stuff. The last thing to tie it all together, oftentimes we use this with the board or again, in that executive conversation, when you can start showing the initiatives that you're investing into and how much FTEs, full-time employees, and cost is going into each initiative, and you combine that with engineering execution. Do we have good predictability and capacity accuracy, or is that something that we're struggling with there? As well as a recommendation to boost investment or decrease investment. I think this is a great way to have all the information that you need to have that conversation.
This view is really rad.
Yeah, this view is awesome. We are at the end of our show here, and a few things to call out. We would love to work with you to start your metrics program together. But before we get there, the next session that we're doing in our summer series, that is going to be all around that automation stuff, things like Gitstream and WorkerBee. That's on June 20th. If you're interested in talking to us more about everything that you've seen today with building a metrics program and getting your benchmarks, you can try LinearB for free, or of course, you can book a demo. And lastly, everything that you were seeing around the resource allocation, I think you can see it small right here, your investment profile, your cost profile, that view that Jenna said she really, really liked, you can download that leadership deck and use that for your next board or executive conversation. So thank you, everyone, for listening to us today. And Jenna, awesome presenting with you.
Yeah, this was really fun. I'm so glad we got to do this.